Welcome to the Septuagint versus the Masoretic. This is the only ministry in the world where we look at the Septuagint, the scriptures that existed during Jesus Christ's time, and the disciples and the early New Testament church used this scripture, this version of scriptures, for over 1,000 years. And we take the Masoretic text, which is the version of scriptures that was produced 300 years after Jesus Christ already lived, died, and was resurrected. So we look at these side by side, line by line, from the beginning to the end, from cover to cover, Genesis to the end of the prophets. And we find ourselves today in Deuteronomy chapter 20. So let's look at that. We have 20 verses in this chapter. Beginning in verse 1, it says if versus when. We see war, the word war being used, versus battle. We have an omission as well. You shall not be afraid of them. Versus be not. So you shall was omitted. In verse 3, we have our first significant difference, the word confounded. Neither be confounded versus tremble. So it's one thing to be confused. It's another thing to be trembling, to be afraid. Those are two very different emotions. It says here, neither turn aside from their face versus neither be you terrified because of them. So it's one thing to turn aside, to just be cowardly, and there's another thing to be terrified, like horrified. I'd say if you're cowardly, it doesn't mean you're overwhelmed. It just means you do not want to engage. But if you're terrified, you are somewhat of a coward. I think that's more cowardly. Anyhow, moving on, in verse 4, another significant difference says, fight with you. It says, Yah, your Elohim, will fight with you, meaning will fight with you on your side, versus he will fight for you. So the difference I see here is that in one case, in the Septuagint, you are participating, you are a participant, you are fighting in the battle alongside Yah, but in the Masoretic, it's Yah doing all the work. In verse 5, he's doing all the fighting for you. Verse 5, scribes versus officers. And then in verse 6, made merry, a vineyard being made merry with it versus eaten of it. So it's one thing to just eat of it, but it's another thing to take part of the vineyard and have it cheer you up. So it has an emotional consequence or emotional effect. Verse 7, take her. What man is he that has betrothed a wife and has not taken her? Does this mean to marry her? Or does this mean to consummate the marriage? I'm not sure. But it can be taken either way at this point. So please comment down below what you think it is and why you think that is. Verse 8, cowardly in his heart versus fainthearted. A significant difference we find here, lest he make the heart of his brother fail versus his brethren's heart faint. So we can see that the heart of his brother is failing or fainting because of this person's behavior. It's cause and effect. They're related. Verse 9, no significant difference there. Verse 10, if again versus when, and it says here, overcome them by war versus to fight against it. So the intention is military force versus the intention is to fight, or you already started the fight. So war has not been declared yet in the Septuagint. It is simply being planned. It says here, call them out peaceably versus to proclaim peace unto it. I think it's more specific in the Septuagint as to what actions are being taken. It's not just a umbrella term and saying peace on you. No, it is a peaceable negotiation, a peaceable communication being done. So this can be a true or false peace. In the Masoretic, it is simply a declaration, a proclamation. In the Septuagint, however, you are giving them a chance to surrender without shedding blood, without any blood needing to be shed. No one has to die. We can just talk about this first. Verse 11, the word subject to thee versus serve thee. So they are under your authority versus they are your servants. Verse 12, we have the word invest versus besiege, but in all honesty, they mean the same thing. Investire in Latin means to surround with troops. Verse 13, shall deliver it versus has delivered it. Verse 14, the stuff versus the little ones. It's hard to say whether it does mean children. It could mean children because cattle has been included. Stuff could also mean their merchandise, their property, besides their children as well. Could be an umbrella term including all of that. That is not women and cattle and livestock, which cattle means livestock. That's the implication there. Verse 15, a significant difference in this verse. An omission here. It says, which Yah your Elohim gives you to inherit their land. So the difference I noticed, this thought continues into the next verse. It actually is a huge difference. So it's saying here, you shall not take anything alive of the cities of the nations which, or I should say not of these cities. So these are cities of these nations which Yah does not give them to inherit. So it is not part of the deal, the promised land that was promised to Abraham. This is a rule that applies to these lands, to these cities, to these lands. And then it says in the Masoretic, not of these nations, of the cities of this people which Yah your Elohim does give you. So it's saying these are the lands that Yah is giving you. So this is why it's a huge difference. Not only is it identifying them as opposites, but it's saying in the Septuagint, do not take any people alive. This could mean possibly do not kidnap them, don't take any hostages, versus save alive nothing, meaning don't spare anybody, kill everybody. And it says, but of these cities, of these people, which Yah your Elohim does give you for an inheritance. So these lands, Yah did not include in the promised land again. Versus these are the lands Yah has promised. So it does say in the Masoretic, these are the cities which he did give you for inheritance. And the Septuagint, it says these are not the cities that he gave you to inherit. And this is the rule regarding these specific cities. And it says here in verse 17, you shall surely curse them. So these are the peoples, the Hittite, Amorite, Canaanite, Perizzite, Hivite, Jebusite, and the Girgashite, which was omitted again. It's a continuous difference throughout the texts. It says, put a curse on them, versus to utterly destroy them. So take matters into your own hands, murder everyone. But to curse somebody does not necessarily mean you're murdering them. It just could mean you're saying, Yah, put a curse on them. It's mostly is a verbal action that is undertaken. Okay, verse 18, sin before Yah versus sin against him. Verse 19, if and when, used again. We see an iron tool being used to chop down trees. In verse 19, I'm looking for their iron tool versus an axe. So there is no working around it. There's no loophole that you can use any cutting device at all. But in the Masoretic, you can say, okay, we can't use an axe, but we can use a saw or a chainsaw, no, there's no exception to this rule. Do not cut down these trees, these specific trees. And what it says here, you shall eat of it, because you must eat from the trees, versus so that you can eat of them if you want. So that is the way I understand that. You shall eat of it. There's a big difference here. There's a rhetorical question that is being asked in this verse in the Septuagint. It says here, is the tree that is in the field a man to enter before you into the work of the siege? So is this tree a participant in this war? Is it going to be guilty of bloodshed? Verses in the Masoretic, it says here, for the tree of the field is man's life to employ them in the siege. So it seems to be implying this tree can be used as a tool in war. So go ahead, use it as a tool to help you win. This does sound like a contradictory statement in the Masoretic, I admit. So that is a cause for confusion. In verse 20, which is the last verse of this chapter, the tree which you know to be not fruit-bearing trees, you shall destroy and cut down. It says here in the Masoretic, only the trees that they not trees for meat, you shall destroy and cut them down. So it's saying here, these are trees that produce fruit, that produce food. Those are the ones that you shall not destroy. And then it's saying trees for meat. So it's not being as specific as to what you're eating from the tree. The Septuagint, it is clear it is fruit-bearing trees. So that's all I have for you for this chapter. Thank you very much for your time. As you can see, we're trying to improve the production quality of the videos moving forward. I thank you very much for your time. Please like and subscribe to this channel. Like this video and subscribe to the channel, and click on the notification bell so you will know as soon as I post a video. You'll know it right away. You'll be one of the first to know. You get a head start on everyone else. Thank you very much for your support of this channel. Again, this is the only ministry in the world, on the earth, that is doing this, where we take the Septuagint, the Masoretic, we compare it line by line in order to understand the truth of the scriptures, to understand what Yah expects of us, because it's not just a literature, but it is an instruction booklet as to how we're supposed to conduct and believe and treat each other, and how we relate to our Creator. So thank you again very much for your time. May I bless you all. Until next time, Maranatha.